All right. Today, what we will be doing is we will be doing a more kind of issue-specific consolidated format of my symptoms thus far. Today, it is 9/11. 9/12, excuse me. 9/12. So, it has been since about, early February since my twitching began. Now that I'm consciously really thinking about that, I think my twitching actually began before COVID, which is kind of a shitty thing because that was kind of the hope for a while that I developed it after COVID. Now, granted, it would be after my vaccine. My vaccine was gotten. I received my Pfizer first shot in November 10th, and I had been dealing with the health anxiety for a year prior to that, about a year and some change, after a terrible mushroom trip, which very stupid decision. Sporadic, I was a pretty heavy drinker, heavy for people in rural areas with friends that party and stuff like that. And then the occasional cocaine use, which, I'm not proud of or anything, but I got to be honest so that it helps people, or it helps identify what's really going on with me or whatever, what have you. So, because what happened initially was that I was really lean back then. I'd lost a bunch of weight on purpose. I had the terrible mushroom trip, and that's actually gave me that was the beginning of my health anxiety. I started being afraid to eat certain types of food because I thought they were going to kill me. So I could only eat these specific ribs that my wife would make, these beef spare ribs when I take them to work. I also went through a really catastrophic fight with my wife. There was some, we might have ended our relationship. She was pregnant at the time. It was really bad, really ugly. And so there was a ton of stress there. So, kind of time went on after. So around at the end of February, then we ended up getting COVID. And so before that, I was having these, what I just felt like they were like these little slight touch sensations all over my body. And they were very, very few and far between, though, very, very intermittent. And I only noticed it when I was wearing my slim fit clothes. And so I had thought my wife had stopped using the dryer sheets that you use in the laundry. And so I had assumed that that's what was causing that. Because once I found out she wasn't using dryer sheets, I was like, I don't feel it when I don't have those clothes on. And so it's probably just because they're form-fitting and I'm getting little discharges or something. It's just kind of an uncomfortable thing. Now looking back on that, I don't think that that's what it was. I think that I was having very small muscle twitches, but they were all over my body. For sure, I would get them in my arms, I would get them in my calves, I would get them in my quads, even in my feet, everywhere, all over. But mainly in my limbs. It was in my arms and legs mainly. Legs primarily, it seemed like. So then what happens is, so that was between my shot, my Pfizer single shot, because I never got another shot because I was afraid of the side effects. So when I heard that there were people who just get one shot and that was enough to protect them from serious illness, and that's all I cared about. I just didn't want to die from COVID because I had such bad health anxiety. It's like, well, I don't want to die from COVID, so I'll get one dose of the vaccine. Most people don't get any negative symptoms from one dose. It's the second dose that tends to give them the most side effects. So maybe this is the necessary amount of protection. So that was November. About a few weeks, about a month before I got COVID, I started having those weird things. I was having basically a mental breakdown because I was thinking that I had some type of... I'd been thinking I had so many illnesses before that because I was having insomnia issues. So I thought I had fatal insomnia. I thought, I was having shaking issues in my hands and stuff like that. So I thought I had Parkinson's. All just seemingly benign anxiety symptoms, at least so we think. We don't know if these are related, and this was kind of the downward trail of events. Then I end up getting COVID after a Vegas trip for a bachelor and bachelorette co-ed party. Wife got it first, baby got it, then I got it. Very mildly ill. Didn't feel too bad, but my sleeping issues were still problematic and stuff. And I ran a fever and I didn't feel very good, but I wasn't in any dire straits or anything. I think I was only sick for about 3 or 4 days. And then after that was when the kind of explosion of crazy symptoms started. So that was when I developed the really intense twitching right along my back lat here. I mean, it was just like, boom, 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 boom. What happened was I was laying on the couch. I got up to go play some games or to hang out on my computer. And they just like exploded. And it was nonstop for like hours. I was like, what is going on here? And I just felt really shaky and weak. And I remember like I would lean so I ended up going back to work after I had recovered. And I remember leaning my arm on the wall at work, like talking to somebody, and my arm was just like, I mean, like shaking like a leaf. And I was like, that's bizarre. My legs were shaky. I drive a manual transmission. To push in my clutch, my leg would shake. I was like, holy crap, dude, was this all just like COVID? And then the twitching moved from my shoulder into my legs. It stopped in my shoulder entirely, stopped dead in its tracks, and then just moved into my legs. And it was mainly in my calves. But I would get kind of little small twitches everywhere else. I would get them like in my forearm. I'd get them in my hand. Very, very rarely. It was mainly in my calves, some other places in my legs, but mainly my calves. So time started kind of going on, and, we're like, okay, is it stress? You've been thinking you've had all these issues, these health anxiety things. Is it COVID? We started trying to work really on that stuff, trying to get me some mental health help, like some therapy and stuff like that, and then some antidepressants or anti-anxiety medication, some Paxil, because that's what my mother takes. My mother has agoraphobia really badly. My grandfather on her side has really bad illness. Was it perceived illness disorder? They call it now instead of hypochondria. And so he had to have actually electroshock therapy and stuff like that. Tried to kill himself. Tried to take his own life 4 times because he just perceived that he was chronically ill. Poor guy. So God rest his soul. He's passed now. My mother's still with us. So I talked to the psych about it, and he was like, "Okay, well, if your grandfather and your mother are both on Paxil, let's try you on Paxil." All while the twitching is pretty much my only symptom at that point. And then I start taking, it took me a long time to take the Paxil because I was just afraid of the side effects. You read so much stuff about like sexual side effects, and I still want to me and my wife still want to try for a boy, and, all these things. I didn't want to change who I was. I didn't want to change my mental states, irreparable brain changes, all these kinds of things. I'm like, I like who I am. I don't want to change this and blah, 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 blah. All the while, though, I'm unwell. I'm mentally very unwell. Having constant panic attacks, constant crying, kind of mental breakdowns. My parents are having to show up at my house, me and my wife's house, and try to console me. My friends are trying to console me. All that stuff's kind of going on. So I kind of started drinking a little bit too much again because I had kind of some not crazy alcohol use, but just drinking to self-medicate. Light stuff just like beer and or seltzers, nothing hard liquor or like finishing bottles or hiding alcohol or anything like that. And so then my mental health it just got so bad that we were like, okay, well, I can't work anymore because of these symptoms and stuff. And what I had done is I had looked up these muscle twitches, and I had found out that it's related to ALS. And one of the first things that they talked about were brisk reflexes, and with muscle twitching, that twitching is always benign if you don't have like a reflex change and you don't have any other symptoms that come up in a clinical. So I was like, okay, let me check this whole brisk reflex thing out. And lo and behold, I know they say you're not supposed to test yourself and all this crap, but lo and behold, I can just tap. I mean, just so lightly tap my patellar on either side. It's symmetrical, but I can light my leg up. I mean, so easily. And I've tested my friends. they've tested me and my wife has tested me, and nobody has as hot of reflexes as I do. Now, granted, I had almost a year and a half to 2 years of health anxiety prior to this, but they're extremely hot. So, so now I've got the muscle twitches, these brisk reflexes. I also find out about the Hoffman sign. I have bilateral Hoffman sign for sure, on both hands. And then, so I end up quitting work because basically at that point I'm convinced that I have ALS. I do. I have ALS. There's just no way that I don't. Only symptom is really twitching. And then I was getting some weird buzzing sensations. That was another thing that was happening. It started in my left foot. My whole left foot would buzz like it was like a phone. It was a pulsating buzz. So it would be like buzz, and it would radiate and get stronger and then reduce and go away, and then radiate and get stronger and then reduce and go away. That was happening before COVID, and right around the time when I was recovering from COVID. And then it moved out of my foot into an area above my knee, and it stopped happening at my left foot, and then moved to my left knee and stayed there for like a week or two. They always stayed for around a week or two. And then moved into my forearm, like right about here, and it stayed there for about a week or two. And then it moved right to the top of my spine, where my spine meets my neckline. And it's just been there ever since. This kind of slow pulsating buzz. It's sometimes there, sometimes not, but it hasn't gone to a different area again. Like right now it's not there, but it's normally there when I'm sitting down or something like that. So there's that. Where was I? So I've got all these symptoms. I ended up quitting my job because I just couldn't keep it together. I was crying every day, couldn't focus on my job, was like, and the other thing I noticed is I was clumsier. I would like bang my shoulders on doorways. And I'm kind of a big guy. I'm, about 6 foot, about before I had my weight loss, I got all the way down to about 180, but I've always walked around between 220 and 250. I'm about 6 foot and 220 and 250. Always been kind of a broad shouldered kind of a dude. So, but I started bumping into stuff all the time. Bumping into my doors at the house. I started banging my head on stuff. And maybe it's just because you're so, and I see this as the thing, and other people have talked about this, is that you don't really know where the anxiety intersects and the symptoms. The anxiety starts and the symptoms start or end, where the interplay is between those two things. But I remember distinctly that I would be, I was at work and I was banging my head on, like I would just lift my head up, forget that there's something above my head, bang my head, trying to pick stuff up, and I was just so shaky. In a way that I've never been. I've always been an avid kind of fitness guy. Never was that shaky before COVID, or before whatever happened to me. And then, so I ended up quitting work because it was kind of like, hey, they're going to fire you or you're going to step away. And so I stepped away. So the symptoms continued, and the twitching spread more more areas of my body. Like I remember one of the days that I was at work and my chin was just like going off, just nonstop for like an hour or two. Maybe not an hour, but about 30 minutes. I started getting them in my upper lip. And it's just like slow little pulls. It seems to be when I'm resting more so than anything else, but I'll get them there. I would get them on my scalp. I'd get them in both hands, like on the pads of both sides of my hands. I'll get my least favorite ones are these. Sorry, I just had blood work done today. I'll get these big ones like right in my forearms that are so big that they'll twitch and it'll go and it'll move my finger. It's such a large area, and they're the most uncomfortable ones. I'll get them above my kneecap. I'll get them on my quads. I'll get them in my glutes. I'll get them in my hamstrings, and a ton in my calves, and a tons in the top and bottoms of my feet. So they're everywhere. I remember that my tongue twitched shortly after all those symptoms. It's funny because my boss, while I was quitting the job, I told him, hey, I got to step away. I'm just not mentally capable of doing the job anymore until I get this whole thing figured out and find out that I don't have a debilitating illness. And they've always left the door open for me to come back after I get this whole thing settled. But he said, has your tongue twitched yet? because he turns out he has benign fasciculation syndrome, which is bizarre to me, and it started in his foot. It just came out of nowhere. I think he said he had like a minor cold. This is like years and years, 8 years ago or something. Started in his foot, and it was constant. He twitched all the time in like the arches of one of his foot. And so he got put on ALS watch, actually. And he twitches everywhere, he says, now. And it's worse when he doesn't sleep. But he says, yeah, it's just something I have to deal with. It seems like if I'm more stressed or I don't sleep or I drink too much coffee, it gets worse. I'm like, crazy, dude. Couldn't really believe him, though, because your anxiety doesn't allow you to self-soothe in any way. Everyone else is wrong, and you're right. You know yourself better. So I told him that mine were really widespread, and he was like, yeah, then why are you even worried about it? I was like, well, it's just because they're so consistent. Because like I said, I twitch, depending on the day, every 10 to 60 seconds all the time while I'm laying in bed, while I'm up as soon as I wake up. There's a weird lag time in the morning, like while I'm laying there and I'm waking up, sometimes they're not there. But if I wake up and sometimes I'll wake up in a little bit of a panic attack, they're definitely there then. But it's all day, all the time, no days of rest ever. And they're all everywhere. And then I will have what some BFS people have reported, which are hot spots, and then they don't return. So I had one 2 days ago that was on my left, right above my left knee, and it went on for about an hour and a half. It would only stop when I moved it, and then it would restart as soon as I put the knee down. Very annoying. And I've had other areas that were kind of like that. I had one that was like moving my pinky finger over and over and over again. And that one stayed for 20 minutes or something like that. I'll get ones that pull my thumb inward. Like it'll move my thumb like that. It's, the other thing that started happening was I noticed that, when I would try to close my fingers together like this, I would get these really wobbly motions. And I'm medicated right now, so it's probably with benzodiazepines. So they're probably not going to happen because, just the nature of the drugs. And then I noticed that on a fine motor motion, when I would pinch my thumb and my index finger together, I mean, like this whole area of my hand would shake really bad. Like, it's like I couldn't hold on to it. It would almost fall. It wasn't like it was a weakness. It was just like the main thing that would happen is because I would give my daughter ice all the time, and like that kind of counterbalancing movement where I'd have to like constantly kind of keep a hold of it. I couldn't squeeze it too hard because it would it would slip out of my fingers. So I had to kind of control it slightly. That motion would trigger it, and it would just like cause my whole hand almost to shake and to tremor, and then I would drop it. That for whatever reason seems to have gone away, but that was a thing. But that could just be some of the meds that I'm taking now. So at that point I'd quit my job. My wife had, tried to go back to work. The twitches just became more spread than they were previously. They were mainly in my calves before, mainly in my lower parts of my legs. But then I just kind of started getting them everywhere, like full bicep moving twitches, full tricep moving twitches. I noticed the one that started the whole shebang would come back every once in a while. It was back behind my shoulder blade, and it's only when I'm really stressed or I'm really tired or I'm really cold, weirdly enough, it'll come back and it'll twitch right behind my shoulder, and it's like constant, super annoying. So that one's a very present one. It's like a quote unquote hotspot. And then I have these anomalous vision issues. I have this whirling, or it looks like a pulsing light on the bottoms of my vision in dim light. It's very hard to describe, but it's like if I look at, it's in a dimly lit room, especially if it's a lighter colored, like a flooring, and it's dimly lit, and I look kind of up and away from that object will look like it's got flashing, like somebody's flashing a low level light on it. Like it just goes and it just constantly kind of flickers all the time in dark areas, pretty much constantly, no matter what. That always happens every night. And I don't really know when that started happening, because it's easy to notice when you're paying attention, but it's not super obvious. The other thing that I noticed is that I have unequal pupil size. On occasion, it comes and goes. I don't know why that is. Here, I have pictures of it. And that's the thing, is I don't know when that happened. I see pictures of myself, like going back 6 years, that I might have had that then, but it's really hard to tell. There's just not, I don't know about the camera quality and how well you can see, but that should show a pretty decent difference in eye size there. But that, and then the massive increase in floaters in only my right eye. I went to the optometrist. They're like, you have a retinal detachment for sure, because and I was having flashing lights. So they're like, we're going to see a retinal detachment or a post-vitreous detachment of some kind. My eyes were totally fine. Both of them. The only thing they noticed was that I was having what he called visual field deficits. When they hooked me up to an OCT scanner, and it kind of like flickers these patterns in your peripheral vision, I was having serious difficulties seeing those. But it wasn't because my peripheral vision wasn't good. It was because there was this weird effect that was happening. Whenever I would close my eye and look at the central dot, I would get this like clouding effect that would just it would like make everything else disappear. And apparently that's a symptom of anxiety. Because I've tested myself elsewhere and my peripheral vision is fine. And the doctor did like a gross field test where he would hold his hands up. He's like, yeah, your field of vision seems fine, but you failed really badly on that test. And so we need to send you to a neuro-ophthalmologist, because we don't really know what's going on. It's very bizarre. And I'm colorblind. I'm deutanotropic colorblind. Have been since I was a kid. So that was weird. So massive increase in floaters, flickering vision, and then something that recently happened, and I same thing, I believe this is new because I never noticed it before, is what's called pattern glare. When I look at a black background with white text, especially the smaller that it is, it gets this flickering effect, like it's jumping or it's moving or it shakes. And of course I look up, I've looked up so much stuff about ALS and other neurodegenerative diseases, which I pretty much am convinced that I don't have any of them anymore. I'm pretty much convinced that I have ALS, but I thought I had Parkinson's for a little while, CJD, all these things, but I don't think that I have any of those now. So one of the things that happened when I started having these weird vision issues, which was only a couple months ago, I think 3 or 4 months ago, I looked up pattern glare, and it talked about cortical hyperexcitability. And it's actually present in people with a lot of major depressive disorders, increased levels of pattern glare, because of cortical hyperexcitability is a marker of depression. Well, unfortunately, all I did was look up cortical hyperexcitability, and the first thing that comes up is ALS. Say, oh, cortical hyperexcitability is an early biomarker of ALS. And I was like, fuck. Fantastic. Didn't mean to make that connection, but unfortunately now that connection is there, and that could be a symptom of ALS. The weird vision issues that I'm having. Maybe not the floaters or anything, but the flickering the vision and the pattern glare could just be a hyperexcitability of the brain. So, too much glutamate, not getting cleared out and stuff like that. So, and I worry about my past sporadic use of drugs and alcohol damaging my whole GABA glutamate whole system there, because they talk about one of the main transporters. I don't remember which molecule it is or which mechanism it is, but there's a specific transporter that transports glutamate out of areas and dumps it away to kind of protect cells. And they say that that's one of the things that cocaine damages the most, and so it leaves excess glutamate kind of floating around. So that sucks. That's my own, and that's by my own hand. That's by my own doing, sadly, which makes a lot of this worse. And then So let me think here. Let me kind of center. Sorry, I get in these rambling modes now, and it's hard for me to track where I was at. So we've got body-wide muscle twitching. That's everywhere, present, all the time, all day long. Doesn't give me a break. Never a day without it. The weird kind of unintentional movements in my hands. The kind of tremoring in fine motor movements in my left hand. I was actually doing those little Parkinson's spirals, and I could trigger it by doing that. I could try to do the spiral, and some of the spirals would have really jagged edges. I used to have it drawn. I could show you, but can't show you anymore because I threw that away. And then just continuous kind of shakiness of muscles, feeling just weak. Which is perceived. I don't have serious problems, but I did notice that I drop things pretty regularly now. My wife is always like, "Why are you clanging all the dishes and stuff around all the time?" And I do. I drop things like they hit the counter like constantly in the kitchen. I'm constantly dropping stuff. But it doesn't feel like I have any weakness. I have my little grip strength trainers. Don't detect a difference. And initially, when I had COVID, there was a difference. Right when I recovered from COVID and I went back to work, my these fingers on my left hand were like almost non-functioning. I couldn't type with these two fingers like at all. Now that seems to have gotten a lot better. Just my hand dexterity seems to have gotten a lot better since I recovered. But the muscle twitches are still persistent. And then, of course, the other thing is just fatigue, like constant fatigue, no matter how much I sleep. So yeah, that's kind of where we're at. We've got constant body-wide muscle twitches. We had those vibration sensations. I did have paresthesias in my hands and feet for a little while. That seemed to go away though, for whatever reason. I would just have them kind of when I was sitting down, and they just stopped happening. I don't know what's up with that. Oh, and then another thing that was happening for a long time before all of this started was I was waking up I was sleeping in our bed, which I've always complained was uncomfortable. Me and my wife's bed, some box mattress from Amazon, it's not very nice mattress. I was waking up constantly with numb hands, especially in my ulnar areas, these two fingers on both hands, sometimes just one, but every time in my ulnar nerves, I was waking up with numb hands, happening over and over and over and over and over again. And it would wake me up throughout the night, and I would toss and I would turn. So I moved to sleeping on the couch, and that's better now. So I don't know if that was what was causing but that wouldn't explain the tingling in my feet. But that seems to have resolved. I haven't woken up with numb hands in quite some time, but I'm sleeping in a kind of a more elevated way. And so I don't know if that's a result of the fact that I'm getting a little bit more oxygen, because I read there's another guy on an ALS forum who had more respiratory onset ALS, young guy too, it's like 36, and he complained of the same thing, saying that he was getting numb hands when he would sleep because of low oxygen usage or utilization because of his diaphragm. Now, I don't feel like I have breathing problems, but they say a lot of people don't. They don't really know that they have them, so I'm trying to get some breathing tests done to see if my diaphragm is functioning properly. But what else? Where are we? Yeah, so that was a symptom very early on that I didn't really relate to anything. And now that's kind of where we are. It's been about 7 months. And so I don't have the tingling in my hands and my feet anymore. And I was having I developed kind of myoclonic jerks that were happening, number one, really bad when I was trying to go to sleep. Like, that would jerk myself awake really bad. Those sucked. But I think those were, like I said, a result of getting put on Paxil medication, because they seem to start with the Paxil and they seem to go away when I stopped taking the Paxil. But it took a while for it to go away. But I think that went away. That was related to that, because I was getting them throughout the day. I would just be sitting there and my arm would just kind of, whole limb would just kind of jolt over. My whole hand would move over, stuff like that. So I had those. That went away. Another thing that was occurring pretty early on after the COVID recovery was my whole chest would be vibrating. I would wake up and it was like my whole chest was moving. Just like brrr, just big vibrations. All my arms, and it was mainly in the morning. I would just be like trembling everywhere. That seems to have resolved. I don't really get that anymore. And I don't really know what was causing that, but that seems to have resolved. So what we're really left with is we have constant body-wide muscle twitches everywhere. And this kind of constant need for me to clear my throat. I have to do that all the time. I can swallow fine, but constant need to clear my throat. I have pretty heavy mucus all the time. And I went when I was at the doctor, they said that I had some postnasal drip. And I don't know, but I mean, granted, I live in the valley of Central California, and the air quality here is terrible, and there's terrible allergies out here. So I don't know how much of that's related. So now we have body-wide muscle twitches, some that are so intense they move fingers and things like that. Pretty much from head to toe. I had tongue twitches after Easter Vigil. I felt it like a zap. It was like a battery, like when you touch a 9-volt battery to your tongue. And it was right about there. Right about there. And I could see it at rest, and it would just like, it would indent one, like 1, 2, stop, 1, 2, stop. And it never came back. I think I only saw it for a day or two. Had a big mental breakdown that day, obviously, because of that. So that's kind of the story. So we're about 7 months in. Symptoms haven't really gotten too much worse. Some things have resolved. Some things are constant, like the muscle twitching that never goes away. It seems like gabapentin helped me out a little bit. Gabapentin seemed to have helped with the muscle twitching, or I don't know if it just helped with the anxiety and that in turn moved the muscle twitching down. I don't know. But I did, however, I went to the first neurologist. He gave me an EMG. The EMG, he said, came out clean. No, I have it. I have the paper somewhere. No signs of radiculopathy, nothing. I'll make a separate video about my results from my doctors, and I'll read those off. But that's kind of where we're at. So I guess that's a more succinct. It's 30 minutes long, but it's a more succinct of my present symptoms currently, where I'm at. So I appreciate it. Thanks for the watch, and just trying to figure it out, man.